my name is Sarah Carell, and we are doing a series called Wounds to Wisdom, Healing Through Veteran and First Responder Narratives. And this is a book about our protectors. So we have 29 authors that are sharing their stories of trauma to resilience. And today we get to highlight one of our wonderful authors, Richard Oakley, otherwise known as Rich. And Rich is a retired DEA senior special agent. So I would just want to welcome you, Rich. Thanks for having this conversation with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start out, Rich, what was life like for you growing up? What was it like for you, and what led you to wanting to be a law enforcement officer?
I lost my dad when I was 13 years old, and I played sports in school. And you know, at the end of the game, you'd have all the dads coming down and hugging their sons and whatever. And I was always like the outcast or the outlier. So there were a couple of police officers in my town where I grew up that had befriended me, and they were sort of looking out for me. And uh, they took care of me, And the more I interacted with them, the more I said I want to be like them. And so I grew up with that being my dream job to become a law enforcement officer and to help people.
To help people, because you had a good experience with law enforcement officers, and so that was inspiring to you. Yeah.
Yes, it
That's
was. And then also I grew up watching Dragnet, so that was also a motivator.
right. I remember Dragnet. Oh, interesting. So inspired by a TV show and then a good interaction with law enforcement officers. So that was your inspiration. You wanted to help people. So you become a law enforcement officer. And what was that like for you right at the beginning?
Well, um, in the beginning, it was very, very uh, traumatic, I'd say, because first of all, I learned that I was the enemy now. When I put on that uniform, I became the enemy in my own community, because back in the '60s, there wasn't a lot of trust for police officers. So, and especially, you know, being black, uh, some people thought you were looked at you as a traitor. They didn't want to trust you and stuff like that. But uh, as as time went on, I was able to. I had a few walk-in posts, which I liked because it gave me an opportunity to mix with the community, uh, and that worked out pretty well. Uh, and then I got bounced into a radio car, which separates you from the people unless you have a call for service. And I I think 2 years in patrol, and then I was promoted to the position of a detective, and I was working narcotics and homicides at that time. Um, I did have one uh, traumatic experience during my time as a police officer. There was uh, a sergeant that was running the narcotics squad, and he said to me, he said, "You want to be in the narcotics squad, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you have to make some arrests while you're on patrol." And so that's what I started to do. One day he called me on the radio and he says, "Come over here. I want you to see something." So I went to meet him, and he had four people. It was three white guys and a black female. And he said, "You see these people? If you ever see them, stop them, find out what they're doing, and you know, ask them for their ID cards and all that stuff. So uh, this particular day, I was working a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. I got off from work. I drove home, took off my uniform blouse, my gun belt. I had my uniform pants on, and I had to run out to one of the local stores. I had a 65 Mustang. So as I'm driving out of my apartment, I'm at my apartment complex. I see those individuals standing on the corner of my complex. So I, I immediately pulled over and I got out of my car and I said, "Hey, what are you people doing here?" And then two of them pulled pistols on me. Now, I'm not armed. So they forced me into my car. Uh, and they took one was driving, up one passenger, and then we were jammed up in the back. Uh, and my nightstick was in the car, so they were hitting me with that on every once in a while. But as we're leaving my apartment complex, one of them turns on the radio, and that's when I found out that they were wanted for armed robbery. They were waiting there for their pickup person to get them out of town, and it just so happened that I wound up being that pickup person by accident.
Very interesting.
But
And how did that unfold?
so so we they finally we went through Trenton and the circuitous route, and we wound up in New York City, West End and 72nd Street. They parked the car, they jumped out, and they ran. Uh, so I sat there for I mean, I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. I was just,
Because
thank God I
weren't
was
they
alive, and and
weren't they threatening you too? They weren't they threatening to kill you too on that trip?
yes, yes, yes. The whole trip they were talking about killing me, and then one guy said, "Yeah, because now we broke the Lindbergh law, crossing state lines with a kidnapper." So
Mm.
uh, brings the FBI in. So uh, one guy was kind of sympathetic, and he kept saying, "Man, let's just rough him up and leave him," you know. And so once they got out of the car, they left. I sat there for a few minutes, and then I decided to drive to my back home. When I got there, I went to my sergeant and I explained to him what happened, and he said to me, "Well, did, how did this happen? Didn't you have your weapon?" I said, "No," and he said, "Well, there's a regulation that if you don't, you could get fired for not having your weapon, especially you because you're a probationary patrolman. I was only 6 months on the job, and you have to do a year probation, right?" So it was decided that I would tell the story uh, that I had my gun.
Mm.
Well, uh, we go to New York. I spend about a week with the Manhattan North Detective Squad. They're out looking for these people, and within a matter of a couple of days, they had them, and they were extradited back to New Jersey, New Brunswick, and we were getting ready. It took a while, but I had to go to grand jury and testify, and then finally we went to trial. And during the trial, I remember first time ever in a courtroom. I walked in there and it's just it was all struck. I was all struck. And so I'm on the stand. I'm the first one on the stand. Of course, I'm their only witness. And they're asking the prosecutors asking me all these questions about what happened, blah blah blah. So I think I was up there for a day just with the prosecution end of it. The next day, I had three defense attorneys that were going to take their turn cross-examining me. and and it was rough. I mean, it was rough. They were yelling at me, and they were doing everything. I learned later on in life, in my career, that those tactics are done to throw you off, to get you angry. They want the jury to see, oh, this is a hothead, right, or something like that. So I didn't know any better. So anyway, one of the defense attorneys says, um, I have a problem. And I said, well, what's that, sir? He said, if you had your weapon, why didn't you shoot at them? And I said, well, because they were running into a crowd of people. And he said, no, you didn't have a weapon, did you?
Mm.
I said, yeah, I did. So he wore me down, and I had to admit that I didn't have my weapon. And so then the next attorney gets up, and they're driving that home. They're driving that home. A 4-day trial. Uh, the jury went out to deliberate. They went out maybe a couple of hours, and they came back and they said, not guilty. I was destroyed. Not guilty. And I remember I sat there numb for a while in the courthouse, and then I left. I got in my car, and I went out to a local bar, and I started to drink. And that day began my spiral, my downfall. I just started to self-medicate. I withdrew. Uh, I was worried about my job. I didn't know whether I was going to have a job after everything that happened. Was in the newspapers, and I was
Mm.
working an extra job at a supermarket, and a customer walks in, looks at me, and said, "They should have fired you." And
Mm.
I was like, "Wow." Uh, so in the newspaper, the article comes out, and it says the chief of police is trying to make a scapegoat out of Oakley. So one of the defense attorneys sent me a letter, and he said, if they are going to try to uh, fire you over the fact that you didn't have your weapon, I will represent you free of charge. One of the defense, the one that was really beating me up too, right? And so
Wow.
it
Wow.
never went to that. A group of police officers from my department and the surrounding areas, they got together and they threw a what do you want to call it, a support dinner for me.
Mm.
And a lot of local police officers were there, and it was really, it was a surprise. I was really taken back. I mean, it was really nice.
That,
So
yeah. Can I stop you right there? So
sure,
I
sure,
want to wrap this up because there's just so much in here. There's so much in here. So here you get into a profession in the 60s where the culture at that time does not trust you, does not like you if you're a law enforcement officer. I mean, of course we
right,
know that there's a lot of that going on now too. But you,
yes,
right. So you get into law enforcement and you're liking it because you're kind of on the street and you find you can build these relationships. Then they send you into to the patrol car. Um, you're on probation, and that one mistake is that you did not carry your weapon, right? You off duty is supposed to have a weapon when you go out, and you
24
saw
hours.
these people that you had been
Yeah.
warned about. You didn't have your weapon, so they
Hmm.
kidnap you. And all this time it was terrorizing because they were going to kill you in your mind. They were saying they were going to kill you.
Right.
You get dropped off, they take
Hmm.
off, then you get back into trial. and you had to make that decision that you decided that that was the one thing that you were not going to be honest about whether you had your weapon or not. And that's where the
Right.
defense attorneys, they were trying to find anything to get you riled. And if you find that you have not been honest about something, that is right there can unravel the case, right? So they found it was that one decision, that and as a young person, you were afraid that you were going to lose your job. So you made that choice,
Right.
just to say that you had your weapon. And
Mhm.
so there's so much in there. And did you have a place or a person to be able to share this complicated, huge mess with at the time?
No, I was on my own. I had nobody to talk to. Uh, I was on my own, and I think I told you when it, when the announcement came in the newspaper that I was going to be a police officer. One of my father's sisters called me up, and my aunt, and said, "I would rather see you be a garbage man." I mean, that was the attitude about police back then. My own family. Uh, but
So
I
it's
learned.
all that support, you in the middle of this kind of this circus, you also had family members that just did not like you being a law enforcement officer to begin with. And you
Right,
don't really have a
right.
place or people or anything to be able to process everything that just happened. Everything was in the paper. It was like right there, and you had no one. Now, it does sound like you had support from the other officers because they gave you this encouragement party, but you had no
Hmm.
one to process this with. And so let me ask you something, Rich. How many decades went by that you suffered in silence with this?
I When I went on to two other law enforcement agencies after the police department. I worked for the county one in New Jersey, and then I went on to DEA. All DEA never knew about it. I never talked to anybody in DEA. I never talked to anybody in the other agency, and it wasn't until 1991 when I was with DEA where I was able to get some counseling, and it really, I really wasn't healed to speak of. Uh, it wasn't until I found you on LinkedIn and the power of our story, and that's when I actually, for the first time, I felt comfortable in letting it out, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when I told that story. Uh,
So we're talking how many
and
was that so I'm thinking you said this happened in the 70s?
the incident, the kidnapping, was 1968, and then I had a
68.
assassination attempt in Newark, New Jersey, while I was with DEA. Uh, the next day, they wanted me to go undercover again. Uh, you know, and
Wow.
so
Yeah.
so I carried that. There, there was nothing there for me, even with DEA. There was nothing for me. Just suffer in silence. You'll suck it up and keep going.
And
Uh,
and so tell me too, like, okay, so what happened to you? First off, just two questions. How did you deal with that on your own? Both ways, because I think, sometimes there is a silver lining, like it can kind of hone in other strengths when you're trying to suppress that part. But how did it impact you in a negative way and positive way?
uh, the negative way was self-medicating. I went into. I was a functional alcoholic. I had a friend that owned a liquor store, and this is while I'm with DEA. And if I knew I was going to be working past 10 o'clock, I would call him, and he would put a whiskey for me behind the garbage can. And when I got off, I'd go pick it up, go home, and finish it. and get up the next day and go to work. Um, I just carried that stuff with me. I mean, I would sit at home and play music and cry, uh, you know, and I think I was crying out for help. I didn't realize it at the time, but just crying. But the positive thing was, and I would tell anybody this today: tell the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Tell the truth, because if I had told the truth, I wouldn't have had to go through this and carry that trauma with me and suffer in silence for all those what, 3 decades or whatever. Um, tell the truth, no matter what the consequences are. You're much better off. But that trial uh, taught me some lessons. It taught me how to testify in court. And so when I was working for DEA and I started to go, when I was making undercover cases and go to court to testify, I knew: be calm, be collected. Don't let them rile you. You know, uh, if they did, I would simply say, "Could you please repeat that question?" You know, and so it honed some of my skills. Actually, I had the public defender's record. I had a 95% conviction rate with them, so they didn't like me too much. And but that incident really made my career better. It taught me to um, be aware of my surroundings. Uh, you know, uh, like that day when I approached these people. You know, I mean, I knew what they were, but I never expected that to happen. You know.
That is, gosh, that's such a powerful, and I hate to tell you this, but I think it was like 5 decades. From that suffering in silence, right? If that was like 60. So I'm trying to create this picture that, I mean, I can imagine something that traumatizing would hone your skills, because you're like, I am never going to be imperfect again.
Mhm.
Not, of course, we're going to be imperfect, but
Right.
even just the fear of something like that happening, I could imagine that kind of fine tuned everything that you were going to do going forward. But just the fact that you had to self medicate and you never had that place to be open with. If you can think back, like the young rich, you mentioned no matter how hard it is and painful, tell the truth. So we don't know what would have happened to you if you had told the truth, but um, at least it would have been a different trajectory. Um, what
Yes.
else would you tell young rich? Like if this all went down and, to the next person who's suffering in silence or the young rich, is there any advice that you can give?
Yes. Well, along with telling the truth, uh, don't be afraid to reach out and find somebody that you could talk to.
Hmm.
Find somebody you can trust to talk to, and get that off you. Get it off you. You know, just somebody that's going to just listen. You know, uh, and get it off your chest, because I mean, to carry that like I did for that period of time, it ruined me. It really did. Uh, I think about maybe some of the health problems that I have now. I probably wouldn't have had if I wasn't self-medicating. You know, uh, because I was, I would drink till I passed out. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
You're just, yeah. I think,
and then
people,
don't let anybody take your dream. You know, if whatever your dream is, don't let anyone take that from you. Fight for your dream.
yeah, fight for your dream, find someone to talk to. And you did say that you did get a little bit of counseling in the DEA. So maybe that was, what, 10 years later or something? You got it. The DEA's office gave you a little counseling. Okay.
Yeah, I became DEA started a trauma team, and so we were trained. We were dispatched to any agent shootings and stuff like that. I actually had three of them while I was on that team. Um, but the training was a week long, and I remember the psychiatrist put a movie on, The Onion Field, uh, and the lights were out. And when he was finished uh, picking out the excerpts that he wanted us to evaluate, the lights came on, and the tears were just rolling down my face. My desk was wet, and he said, "Rich, what brought that on?" I said, "That reminded me of something that happened to me,"
Yeah.
and that was it. You know, I didn't really elaborate on even at that juncture. I didn't elaborate on because I was afraid. What are these people going to think, right? You know, they think maybe it's a made up story or whatever. You know, but I don't know. Uh, yeah,
It's incredible what you've been through. This is just one story. I know you have others that you have shared before, and it is just like you cannot make some of
yes,
this stuff up. And yet again, it was that pressure of really feeling like you had no safe place to be able to process this with somebody. And it's been wonderful to see you start opening up, start that process of not suffering in silence anymore, start being able to process it, wanting to share with others what you have learned through this book, Wounds to Wisdom. It's such a gift that you're giving other people. And I just, I always feel this conflict of like, gosh, it hurts what so many of you have been through. And yet you are willing, you have that courage and that care for others that you want to help them heal through your story. So, you're still a hero,
yeah,
Rich. You're still a hero. You're still serving and protecting. And, we all just love you. And I just want to thank you so much for having the courage to come on here, have a conversation with me and share your story, because there are people out there that are suffering in silence, and your journey
absolutely,
is going to help them.
absolutely.
So thank you so much for being with me today
Thank
and talking about this, Rich.